The Maharal was discussing a famous Mishnah Chagiga, which talked about esoteric studies, and it categorized 3 studies that should not be done in large groups. There's Masa Merkava, which you shouldn't even, right? We had Masa Merkava with 1 student. We had Masa Bereshis that you shouldn't be teaching to 2 students. The Masa Merkava you should just hint at and not actually teach. Masa Bereshis you could teach to 1 student, but you shouldn't really be teaching to 2. And Sod Arayos, you should be teaching to 2 students, but not in a larger crowd than that. Now, usually Sod Arayos, the word sod is kind of ignored, and you just say, well, it's about, it's crust, it's crude to talk sex in public. So all these mitzvahs about, illegitimate sexual relations, you shouldn't be teaching into a large crowd. In Maharal, though, the word sod was very important, and he said Sod Arayos is actually one of the fields of esoteric studies, of mystical studies. So there's Masa Merkava, which is what's going on. Well, we could look at his definitions right now because we've got to recap them in paragraph Yud Zayin. He says, there are 3 levels. The first, Hua Merkava, it's Masa Merkava, the divine chariot, which, by the way, is not always a chariot. In Yechezkel, it's a chariot. In Parshas Mishpatim, they see a man on a throne. So some of the rishonim explain that really it's a man on a throne. The famous visions of Yirmiyahu and Yechezkel, who describe it as a chariot, is because at that point Israel was going out into Galus. So as a symbol that God was leaving with us, he put his throne in a chariot. And that is the vision that they saw, was God exiling himself along with the Jewish people. But it's not actually about a chariot. It's about a throne and the angels and whatever. And at that moment, the history of that moment was chariot-like, not the eternal metaphysics. But whatever it is, we call it Masa Merkava. So the Masa Merkava is B'masha Hu Yisbarach, Nivdal Min HaNimtzaim Lagamrei. It's about how God is totally different than anything else we thought, anything, within the universe. The creator is different than the creatures. Mibnei ki ha'agash ha'saga hazos, B'masha Yisbarach Nivdal Min HaOlam. And since this understanding about how, in what way God is different from the world, therefore it's inappropriate that this knowledge be in the world at all. Now here he says it's inappropriate, like it's an ethical statement, because he uses the word ra'ui. But if you look at all the intro that we did way back when, his topic is things a Navi cannot explain. So I think what he's saying is that this is knowledge that we barely skim, because the whole point of the knowledge is it's the stuff we can't understand. It's the stuff where he's totally unlike us. And so I think that's the connection between the first part that we saw about how a Navi can only understand things he can relate to, and a Chacham can extrapolate and build from those ideas to things, beyond his experience, or that have no parallels in his experience. But Ein Darshan Merkava B'Yachid, L'Yachid, you don't teach Merkava even to 1, because the whole thing about Merkava is that we're only going to be skimming the edges. It's the things we can't understand. It's how God is different than us. By definition, it's things that we're not going to get. The second level, remember there were 3 levels. Masa Bereshis, right? That's the, Genesis 1 and possibly 1 and 2. Or it could even be just the first pasuk of Bereshis. It really could be anywhere. because rishonim are all over the place, right? You have the rishonim who say that everything happened in the first two verses in terms of creation, and after that Hashem laid the things out. That's Rashi. You have the Ramban who talks about when God created substance and when he gave it form, and you have, right? So whatever it is, Ma'aseh Bereshis, the actual act of creation, is the bringing of the world into action, into reality. Min Hashem Yisparach, from Hashem. Hu Madrega Yoser Nira Ba'olam. This is something which is more seen in the world. Darshan La'echad. So there you could teach it one-on-one. Lishnai Maser, but don't teach it to two students. Sharei Ein Ma'aseh Bereshis Rak Masha Hotzi L'Pol and Ephraim. Because Ma'aseh Bereshis is only the bringing out into reality of that which is created. Abel Harayos. The secret of Harayos. What is it? Shu Chokhmah Nimtzaim Atzmam Shelo Yatzu B'Seder Miseder Haroilah. The Sod Harayos is about the fact that God had a plan. And therefore, it is wrong to violate that plan. The Nimtzaim Atzmam, the things once they exist, should not leave the order, the organization that they were given. So to the Maharal, Sod Harayos is how different things relate. And forbidden sexual relationships like a marriage of a brother and a sister is wrong because it's an example of one kind of relationship being warped into something it's not supposed to be. And that is why the laws of Harayos are associated with Sod Harayos. But Sod Harayos, from the way he explains it, and he doesn't say this, but it struck me when I was preparing it, would also apply to, let's say, shatnez or crossbreeding or all these other things where we talk about God had a plan, and who are you to say that, to consciously make grapefruit. By the way, grapefruit were not consciously made. They were made by wind carrying pollen from one thing to another thing. It was done by God. But we don't cross. I mean, we have a area against crossbreeding. It seems to also be this Sod Harayos idea that God created things in certain relationships, and we shouldn't be violating those relationships. Hu Madrega Od Yoser Shenisla B'Mimtzam Atzmam. This is even more tied to things as opposed to the created as opposed to the creator, right? What we have, Ma'aseh Merkava was about the creator, so that's totally outside. Ma'aseh Bereshis is how the creator brought us into existence. So since it involves us, we could have some comprehension of it. Ma'aseh Sod Harayos is how things that exist relate to each other. So even though it's an esoteric study, it's still all in this world, or closer to being all in this world. Hu Yoser Karov El Ha'olam. It's closer to being in this world. Therefore, you can teach it to two, l'shlosha and to three, it's inappropriate. Because we already said, he called davar kazeh who nivdal min ha'olam atzmo achar himtzao. This whole thing is different from the world, separate from the world after it comes into existence. And after Hashem gave it an order. Therefore, you could still make mistakes. Like it says in Chagiga on the Gemara on the Mishnah. Why haven't you teach three people? Let's say one person asks a question, and now the Rebbe is busy talking on that one person. Something that is just for that one student, which should be secret. And so what are the two board guys going to do? Two board students, guys are not, but I really picture guys to be the store. Two board students are going to come up and start talking to each other. Is actually do business with each other, but they're going to have a conversation on similar topics, which are separate from a person. and you'll come to make a mistake. Because the plan is not in the world. The world implements a plan, but the plan is still one step away from the world. The davar zebarer, and that's clear. So the second you deal with esoterica, just because you can't answer one student's question and leave two students aside, it has to be less than three students in the room. Because the two students will come and start with their own theories while you're busy with one student. So the most you could keep isolated is one person who has no time, whose mind's going to wander. But, they may construct theories, but you're not dealing with this kind of chaburah action going on while you're busy with one of them. Where Maaseh Bereshis, because it's even further removed, we don't want the student constructing his own theories even without help. And Maaseh Merkava, you can't really teach at all. All you could do is give them the pieces for them to figure, for them to hopefully figure it out on their own, because words just don't fit the topic. The topic's about God, and not words don't cover God. So either he's going to skim the edges on his own with what you give him, or the student is just, lost. Not lost. This is not a topic for them. Did that make sense? Now, the Maharal's presentation was a little more, I rationalized it a bit. His presentation was more, this is the most esoteric, so it's one student. It's, no students, or a hint to one student. This is less esoteric, so two students, right? This is the least esoteric, so three students. It doesn't really explain the numbers. But he does hint when he talks about this on the top line. And I extrapolated from that he was trying to go with, there is a pragmatic side as well. It's not just higher level, fewer people. But either way, he divides esoteric into three topics. And the connection, just to remind you, we're taking a hiatus from Derashah Haran. The connection to Derashah Haran was the fact that he believes a prophecy cannot get you any of these topics. Right? First of all, like the Ran, he believes that prophecy is the experience of things that are beyond the physical world, not messages from God. That was one point of comparison. And the second point of comparison was that he talks about the limitations of Nevu'ah, which the Ran had just done at the end of the third Derashah. So here now he's measuring out the limits of even Chokhmah. So he's saying that there's a limit, not so much there's a limit to what the mind can get, right? But there's a limit to what a person can communicate to another person, which is lower than what the recipient can understand. And that is the basis of his explanation of this Mishnah. So far we were talking about how Hester Dover, how God's glory comes from the hidden things, or from hiding things. The Amar, and Mishlei says later on, Uthvod Melachim Chakor Dover. The honor of kings is exploring things, is research. Perush. Kamo Sharoi Lachakor Kavod HaMelech, Asher Hu Molech Hala'am. Just as it is appropriate to explore the honor of the king and how the king rules over the nation. Try and see who else came. Okay. How is this to the glory of the king? Ki barov am hadras melech, because the king's hadras, I'm going to say glory again. Okay, so let's do it this way. The reason why this is to the honor of the king, who barov am hadras melech, because the king's glory is with the large nation. Harei melech kasher yesh lo am. A king, when he has a nation to lead, Ein Kvodo, they are his honor. And when you do research into his leadership to see how he rules them, This is to the honor and glory of the king and the fact that he has a nation. Humani goes and that he rules them. Similarly, when it comes to the king over emperors, in case you're trying to understand Shalom Aleichem, Malchei Amlachim is actually a Semitic language idiom for an emperor, the king over kings, or king over governors, as it would have been in Roman times. So Melech Malchei Amlachim is placing God over the emperors. It's not just using the word 3 times. Malo Kala Aretz Kvodo. So similarly, when it comes to Hashem, whose glory fills the entire world universe, Lo Kasher Himtziosam V'Siderosam. It's not when he called us into existence, or them into existence. He's using third person, and gives them an arrangement and order. Shezeu Kodem Shem Nimtzam B'Shleimus. That was before they existed in full. But once there are humans, or whatever else he rules, and I said humans in particular because of things on earth, that's pretty much it for free will. So then the things that exist are for his kavod. So understanding how Hashem runs the world now that it exists is to his kavod. Trying to make sense of how he brought the world into existence. Go way too far. How he brought the world into existence actually belittles what a great step that was. What a great and unfathomable thing that was, and therefore is against his kavod. Okay, did that make sense? Also, I know this is a topic that Ariel has raised in the past. If one were to posit that that evolution and the science of origins are all true, something I'm willing to posit but not willing to insist. What does this Maharal say to that person? So he talks about putting things into order before everything is done versus what's it called? Understanding how things are once what he intended to create exists. Right? There does seem to be an idea that there's the order that Hashem set up to unfold the order that was the goal state.
Well, yeah, I mean, Rabbi Slifkin talked about back when he was in his Kabbalistic phase, Gestaltschalut and evolution back in 01.
Mm-hmm. So, but back to the Maharal.
Yeah.
We just learned that one, right? So we're up to the test. When I lost the place when it was gold, I went too far the other way. Haresha Usser Lidrosh Barabin Masa Bereshis. It is inappropriate darshan in public, Masa Bereshis. How he brought into existence, into reality, everything that can be found. When we call Shekain She'ein Lidrosh's Kavodo, you're not going to find his glory in his honor in how he is different than everybody else. Or to darshan the secrets of arayos. Hachok, the law, this Chok, I think here is like more law of nature. Shanasan l'nimtzaim, that he gave to that which exists. Shalav nivra'u, shalo yetzu mekukam. That we were created within a certain set of constraints, that we shouldn't be leaving those rules. None of those things are actually the honor of the king. The kavod of a king is when he has a subjects to rule, a nation to rule. Shem kavodo, they are his glory. And he rules them. Lo echim tziyosa. It's not glorious in how he made them. It's glorious in how he runs the world. So he's defining kavod as inhering in how the world is run now that it exists, not the process of setting up or even the process of giving natural rules as he's setting it. And somebody who does action these things, it's like going into the private chambers of a king of flesh and blood, the human king. That isn't to the king's honor. That some commoner is hanging out with the king alone. Therefore, all these things are hester davar. They're trying to grapple with what God is when the answer is beyond you, reduces God. And therefore, it's kind of like trying to understand the king by hanging out with him like he's a buddy. That's how I'm understanding his comparison. Right? Going to the king when he's private is like, you think that the king is as common as and understandable as your friend John, which growing up in a democratic society, he had no problem with that idea. But, the whole idea of a king is that that's not true, or at least in the ideal, that shouldn't be true. So therefore, it's kind of like trying to understand how God set up his kingship as opposed to how God is running the universe. Avomin vayichulu, but starting from vayichulu, shekvar nivru animtzaim kulam shem kvodo yisparach. So the only thing created after the world vayichulu is the concept of resting. Everything that exists already exists. Umikan ve'elach eno medaber rakban hagaso yisparachim animtzam shem kvodo. Only speaks to how Hashem behaves with things that exist already, which is with kavod. It is appropriate to research into this, because that is his glory. The Hashem's glory is how he relates to us on the comprehensible current level, not trying to reduce the incomprehensible creation story or the backdrop behind existence into terms we could get. Even if they are things that are lofty beyond people, and they are more amazing than my aspirations. So let's say, we want to understand how God, split the sea. Is that more amazing than my aspirations? I don't know. Yes, amazing. Okay, that could be more amazing than my aspirations, right? He includes all the nisim in this category. Because they're after the world came to exist. It's still to go figure out how miracles are, which is good because that's what the next Chokhmah is all about. The only thing that's hidden is how the world came to be from him. So the gap from the infinite to the finite, from the one to the many, that, you try to bridge that gap and you make them less infinite and less one. But dealing with things in the world, that's appropriate to go explore. It doesn't mean you'll succeed because it still could be something that's beyond human, right? There's a reason why we call them Apella.
But the fundamental issue I've had with, I guess, extrapolating for the incomprehensible versus literal nature of Masav Reshit, is that, I mean, there are a lot of scientific papers and archaeological studies of continuities of culture and stuff. And does that mean that everything older than 3760 BC is totally unreliable? I mean, and the studies dealing with 3750 BC are legitimate, you know, I mean, or yeah, I mean, sorry to get into the weeds here, but you know,
also we're trying to force him into terms he didn't address because the question didn't address.
Of course.
But yeah, right. If origins are, if some part of origins are incomprehensible, how do you know what, when you look at the past, how do you know what is your mind putting order on things that don't really, that didn't really happen, and therefore you're inventing the order in your perception, and what things are after the crossover into the comprehensible.
No, I mean, like, yeah, I mean, like the archaeological sites that are older than 3760.
Listen to what I said. Because you're going back to your question. I'm trying to reframe your question. Okay. If there is a point in prehistory that is incomprehensible, and when we look at it, we're going to try to create theories for it, even though we can't. How do we know where in the past, when we cross that line, right? It's 3748 years ago when things became, the end of creation, and therefore anything we look at before that, we're inventing stuff? Is it that Maaseh Bereshis is, 13 billion years ago, and everything after that is comprehensible, and we are correctly understanding that? Right? Or some point, any point in the middle is equally a defensible question, right? Right? Maybe the universe is 5 billion years old, and everything before that is because we don't understand how the first 5 billion years worked, so we wrote our own understanding, which is wrong. According to Rav Dessler's take on the Maharal, all of science is correct, but the wrong way to look at the universe if your focus is religion. And everything in Maaseh Bereshis is correct, but the wrong way to look at the universe if you want to. In other words, what actually happened was both. The fact that they look like they contradict is the piece we can't understand. So that's Rav Dessler's take. He doesn't say the scientists are wrong, and he doesn't say the Pesukim are non-literal. He says they say both, and the appearance of a paradox is our limitation. And I don't know if you like that or not. It's a little, I don't know, non-intuitive, it's not just straight, simple, like, it sounds more like the philosopher's thinking than just common sense. That's where I'm looking for. It's not commonsensical, but that's the way the Rav Dessler understands Maharal. That 15 billion years, which is what they thought it was in his day, and 7 days are actually different ways of looking at the same span of time, and we don't really know how time works, and everything happens exactly the way the pasuk says, but we don't understand the pasuk. Everything happened exactly the way the scientists understand, but we don't understand the science. And nobody's actually wrong. The problem is we don't understand how both to be true.
Yeah,
you don't have to like his take. I said it doesn't have much common sense appeal. I'm just saying that's his take. That's the way he deals with the Maharal.
Right.
The Maharal himself can't give you an answer. He didn't exist when the question did. But in his day, scientists thought the universe was infinitely old.
Oh, that's also true. I mean, certainly, I think in some Rav Dessler's correspondences, Talmudim, he has uh like things that seem to endorse like literal, but that's about the Mabul, not
No, he
separation.
brings no right. He brings a lot of Canton stuff though, Rev Dessler. So a lot of things are about the difference between what's really out there and the way humans put order on the universe.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely. For what it's worth, is Talmud Mufak Rav
Aryeh
Carmel's, that's
Carmel,
all, tended to support Rabbi Slifkin's type approach to stuff, or at least cautiously. But
yeah,
again,
right,
this
right.
takes me
But
back to
Talmudim don't always
'05.
agree with the Rebbe. Okay, anyway, all I'm saying is the Maharal would allow you any answer, so it doesn't really address the problem. Right, with the Maharal, you could say the universe is young, everything older is our misunderstanding of things we don't get. You could say it's new and it's old and we don't understand the psukim. You could say, I mean, the second you say you don't understand, the question's unanswerable. Or you can say, like Rav Dessler does, that it's both, and we just don't understand how to do both. But back to the words that we could finish this introduction. The Alpine Dvarman, yeah, we will read. Beside Arayos, Gam Kain Chok, Shanasan Hashem Yisparachlim in flame. Beside Arayos were the rules that Hashem gave the creator, the Davar Seder Shalem, and that's the order, that's the pattern, the plan that they were given. Davar Yesh Lahastir. So the blueprints of the universe are also to be hidden. Abal Hanabdaso El and Ephraim, Achar Hamtsa'am, but how Hashem behaves toward the things that he created after he brought them into existence. Who kvodo yifrach, that's his kavod. They call it in some achar hamtza'am him kvodo, because everything exists for his kavod. The kol asher yesh bo yoser pella, anything that's more wondrous. Who yoser kavod el Hashem yifrach lach. It is more kavod Hashem to go explore it. Because now, instead of saying, I'm understanding God because he's not that different from me, we could, because it's in relation to things we understand, we're actually seeing how big the gap is. Whereas if we try to understand God, then we're already reducing him to human terms. If we try to understand how things came to be, we're reducing Hashem to human terms. We try to understand how Hashem did something wondrous, we're seeing how even now that things exist, he's just, capable of things we're not. We call Shekain, and all the more so, that our explorations in this, are for Hashem's glory. Listom PM shall dover sheker, because it also shuts up the heretics, people who speak falsehood. Adobrim al tzaddik shall olam ater, because they talk about an eternal universe with eternal laws that can never change. So I think that's also part of why he moved the creation of natural law into one of the three fields of esoteric, because the whole subject of the eternal universe, as the Greeks understood it, particularly Aristotle, was because the laws of nature are logically mandatory. And therefore, since something never comes from nothing, something can never come from nothing, and the universe must be infinite laws. The idea that the laws of nature are themselves created go hand in hand with the whole concept, with justifying the whole concept of creation. So in his universe, they'd all be related topics. But usually, I mean, aside from this Maharal, we usually just hear about observation moments and we don't really get, I mean, that's not typical to discuss Soda Rayos as an esoteric field. And the merit of pursuing the truth, or the merit of the truth, will stand for us. And May God teach us the truth. Which is a fitting end for a addendum, which primarily talked about human limitations and obtaining truth. And the topic we had started with, the fact that Nevu'ah is a great way to get your postulates, but therefore can't get you as far as Chokhmah, which can combine postulates into a conclusion.
Just as an aside, I think it's a good moment. I was just thinking, I was
we're about
amused
it,
that
what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found it amusing that that Maharal would use the word would express laws of nature as hukim and not as mishpatim. In a way, it's like, yes, is it arbitrary or not? Yeah, at some point.
Yeah. Well, I think it kind of fits his point.
Yeah.
Because if laws of nature flow out of this soda rayos, that the universe has a plan and everything has a proper place in the plan, right? And therefore there are laws of nature, and soda rayos are one of the topics people can't really fathom, then the laws of nature should be called chutzpah.
Correct.
But you said it as a tangential thing, but I think it really ties into the main theme of the end of that introduction. This next introduction is much longer. We won't be learning the whole thing. I just wanted to show you how he deals with the topic of miracles, because it is really, really, it's interesting. It's another one of these, you have to talk, it's not commonsensical enough for you to just like go with, but I think it's philosophically sound. And it stands in contrast to what we were talking about with. So according to the Ran, the whole reason for Yetzias Mitzrayim and all those overt miracles was as a prelude to the Torah. We should know that the Jews have a connection to the one who teaches Matzah Bereshit, as the Ran understands the phrase Matzah Bereshit, which is pretty close to Matzah Bereshit plus Soda Rayos to the Maharal, but not quite the same itself. But that's that was right. So his whole point of a miracle is to convince people, right? The whole Yetzias Mitzrayim was in order to convince people. Morale's going to go in the opposite direction of it. And it flows for Osos Mosin, Sha'asai Kadosh Baruch Hu Ba'olama. So the wonders, the signs, and the wonders, because that's the only thing I could think of for either Neflos or Mosin. But yeah, 3 different words for the things that happen that Hashem causes that don't fit the pattern and therefore make you go, wow. Sha'asai Kadosh Baruch Hu Ba'olamo, that God does in his world, and therefore show his might to those who come in the world. It's appropriate to show how they go and what they're all about. So we could explain God, how God acts, which, if you recall from the end of the previous introduction, is a proper topic for Chakira. We should be researching it, because that's where God's glory is, when you realize just how far his action is from our action. Afki Lefnei Yisrael Hamaminim, except that to Jews who already believe, Inam Chokrim B'Sichlam, they don't use their brains to do research. Machshavatzam Ledat Devarim Haksumim Ein Tzarech Lotem. That if you're a real believer, unlike the Rambam, who doesn't like the real believer because you need to have proof. Like, the real believer, he doesn't have to bother with all these proofs. He doesn't need a miracle to prove to him there's a God. Because they are tamim, who walk in the paths of the Hashem's Torah, which is the beginning of Kapitel Kufet. Yaminu l'chol divrei haTorah v'hanavim. You're going to believe all the words of Tanakh. I don't know why you didn't say Kitzuvim and I did, but okay. Those of Vamosim, and the signs and the wonders, Shabo, the Torah and the Nevi'im, that are brought in the Torah and the Nevi'im, Lo Yischachmu Aleihem, they're not gonna, they're not gonna understand them. Ve'etzlam Noda Ki Hashem Oseg Gevuros from the flows. Sorry, they will not try to explain them away. Ve'etzlam Noda Ki Hashem Oseg Gevuros from the flows. They know that God does these things. And everything he wants to do in his world, he does. Laharos, livnos, whether it's destructive or constructive. In other words, whether God is like destroying evil or building something up. Chokhmah b'yad hayotzer, like clay in the hand of the potter. You think that he went to the sun and took it or something. No, different field, sorry. But he definitely had that period of commercial channel because he's quoting it. Right, whether he could stretch it if he wants, he could shrink it if he wants. He who borrow may ayin because he created it from nothing. Ba'ad ein yachol lahashivehu. He kahu dasam minim. Nobody can, nobody's going to be able to respond to this. This is what a believer believes. So you notice that he's already introducing this idea that the only people who are going to buy into miracles are people who believe already. The other people are going to rationalize the miracle away. Right? That's how he's starting this whole discussion of miracles. Right? Believers believe the miracles happen. Miracles show Hashem's strength, but you have to be a believer to even believe the miracle happened, as opposed to saying, there was a freak wind that caused the sea to split, or the sea never split. The only evidence we have the sea split is this book, and we don't believe who wrote this book. Right? But somebody believes in the Torah and the prophets, and they're going to believe the miracle happened, and this is going to show them how mighty God. But it's not actually going to bring anybody to believe. Achbo anshe chikrei leiv, achokrim misichlam amidal samer Hashem. But these chikrei leiv, these people with searching hearts, right? They search with their minds and their intellect and their knowledge for Hashem. Mitpalsim rotzim lachim. Their footsteps are toward our desire to learn, to get wise. Al dvarim nistarim, about secret things. Udvarim haniglim, and things are revealed. Veheim osam uleinehem kama v'kamahem. The people who explore the things that are revealed and themselves and that can be seen. Kama v'kamahem, there's a lot of them. Asher zeh amar kacha v'zeh amar kacha. This one says this, that one says that. Ad mahus seichel adam, the mahus, what's the essence of the mind of a person, and nishmaso and so yirbu hadeyos v'chakuros. Right, a person is full of ideas and explorations and conflicts, because whatever one concludes, another one will conclude differently. And this is straight out of the first book of the Kuzari, where he deprecates the value of philosophy, because as you see, anything one philosopher proves, another philosopher has a conflicting theory, and he feels he equally proves his thing. So chikrei leiv, they want to explore after God, but right, this one says this, and that one says that. Kulam ruach v'davarei bahem. They're all wind and empty. Nothing. There's nothing in it. Kima yuchal adasa adam bal chomer. What could a mind of a person who's physical? Afki nasan elokimbo dasu chokhmah. Even though God gave us with knowledge and wisdom, so once he gave it to us, it became attached to the physical. So even our thinking is attached to the Chomer. How could he know things that are totally detached from the physical? Just like somebody cannot be attached to something that's separate, and that's kind of tautological, no? Since his intellect is tied to his body, right? And these are things that are totally not connected to the physical. There's no way that the human mind is going to connect to this stuff. Imlo Yad Hashem Astotos. If Hashem wouldn't help them. You can paraphrase in Yeshaya. Shodia dark of Moshe. Hashem showed his ways to Moshe, Mehem Kiblu Chachamim, and the Chachamim got it from Moshe and the Nevi'im. Odiu Lanu, the Midrashim, the Devrayim, Barman, Elamim, the Hakamusim. And through their Midrashim and their words, they reveal things, they let us know things that are hidden and buried. So this again, just like the last one ended with how it's appropriate to explore even miracles, as long as we're exploring things after the universe is done in creation. Here he is reiterating the theme, one of the themes of the last introduction, by saying people can't understand this. This is not the realm of science. This is the realm of revelation. And even from revelation, we have to go from revelation to Chokhmah. So the only way we're going to know the truths about God is not through science, but through revelation, because science only explores the physical. And if we want to know anything about something separated from the physical, we need a gift from God of that knowledge. And we need Chachamim who could take the gift and develop it. So God gives us wheat and we make bread. The kasher ilu anashim halsim chikru midatam b'sichlam esmas Hashem. And when these people who make themselves philosophers explore with their minds and with their knowledge and their minds, Hashem's action. Yesh yatsu l'derech zar legamri. Some end up in a totally alien place, totally off place. But Osam ein roi lahazkir zichram v'estegram. Doesn't even pay to discuss them. Doesn't pay to mention them. Doesn't pay to mention them or their thoughts. Imlo kamosha amru Chazal. If it wasn't for the fact that Chazal say in Pirkei Avos have a shekod l'umod kadesh tashiv ba'apikores. The only purpose in knowing what these people say is so that you know how to answer them. Because if you don't, then all the innocent third parties are going to be misled. B'yeshehem emunei Yisrael. Now we have the beliefs of Israel. Bo b'sechlam and b'datam al ezen neflos v'nitzin shahayu l'olamim. They came through their intellect and their knowledge about these miracles and these wonders and miracles that have been forever. They Chokhmah aleim, and we thought about them. Yavo b'datam, and it came to their minds. Nisim asher chasvu eina maskim l'daitum. These miracles, they don't fit our thoughts, right? They're not incongruent. They don't agree, is the actual word. So in agreement, incongruent, something like that, with their minds, with their knowledge, the Chokhmah and their wisdom, asher hiskilu b'nimtzaim, because they think about what exists, through the seder and nimtzaim, in the order of the things that exist. Ubishvil zeh chipzu lehem perish asher azkir. And therefore, they search for this explanation, which I'm going to mention. Amnam yesh lomad aleim zchus mitzad ma. We'll give these Jews some kind of merit. We'll be melamed zchus. In other words, we're not justifying what they're saying. We're removing guilt from them being wrong. They didn't get into this saying that they want to chas v'shalom destroy the concept of miracles. Sheina davar kach klal, not at all. Raki v'haya nira ki lefi tzechlom v'datam she'in lo yilapol amiti she'ishana seder mitzios. Rather, it seems to them, what's it called, inappropriate that the true actor would change the order of creation. And this is something we find repeatedly rishonim dealing with all through Shmos. The Ramban, Sforno. Why are there miracles? Not what's the purpose of miracles. How did the perfect creator create a system that needs tweaking? The existence of miracles, we grow up in this world where the natural is explained, and then we have a God of the gaps. You throw God in to explain the things we don't understand. And so lightning is Thor until we have a scientific explanation for lightning. The rishonim actually viewed, many rishonim, because I hate saying the rishonim, like there's any topic they all agreed on, right? But many rishonim understood it the exact opposite. The fact that there is a science and an order and a plan and something we can understand in the universe is actually more revelatory of divine wisdom. And the fact that there are things we don't understand are actually problems, not resolutions. So the Ramban and Sforno asked, why did we need Yetzias Mitzrayim? Why couldn't God have created a universe where everything just works? Why do you need to tweak? So one possible answer, just because we're raising the question and Maharal doesn't, is free will. If there's going to be free will, then there are things that are happening in the universe that God decided not to control, and he may have to tweak the system back. That's one possibility. The Maharal is going to bring a much more elaborate theory that may make the question moot. Oh, sorry. Where were we before I paused? So they didn't want, and here he's, by the way, referring to the Ralbag. The Ralbag believed that every miracle fit within the laws of nature. And the only thing miraculous was that, things played out exactly as we needed. And we'll see further as it goes on. He's definitely taking the Ralbag. He's saying the Ralbag's problem, and we see it in a more minor form in other rishonim, is that they don't share. It's inappropriate for God to change the order of the things that exist. Because they're created in truth and straight. The shanos davar shu ikar mitzios, to change something which is at the essence of existence, Moshe Yisrael, as we will explain. Shamru she'im kain, if so, then the image that he drew, what he created, Masa Yadav, his actions, lack amida, lack permanence. Right? They lack a complete picture. So that's my limit zuchus. My limit zuchus is that they think it's more glorious for God to create a system that doesn't need tweaking. And that's why they start inventing a theory of how every miracle is actually a miraculous coincidence. Also, I should point out in the Ralbag's universe, nature was not deterministic. So everything could be natural, and yet also the fact that it happened is providential. In Aristotle's universe, nature is not deterministic. Everything starts with an intellect making a decision. Although in the case of planets, they don't have free will, so it's always the same decision. But yeah. mitzad acher, coming from the other direction, ein zechus lahem, there's nothing meritorious. Chutz min hatam asher devarim u'perishayim einu nachon l'fi hasechel hadas. Aside from the fact that it's incorrect according to intellect and knowledge, he mofseihem v'rayoseihem lo yitzdaku, because their signs and their proofs are incorrect. They dehem and their evidence ema kisaru min ha'emes v'yosher, is that they strayed from truth and honesty, the very thing that they were trying to preserve of God, emes and yosher. Afki bilbalu lanu.
Bilvado.
No, bilbalu.
No, that's right. Bilbalu. You're right.
Yeah, they
else.
mixed up for us. Heksuvim.
Oh, yes.
Yusolanu Perushim. They mixed up the. In other words, they're misinterpreting the pasuk. They're casting bad interpretations on the interpreters. Right? They're reinterpreting they mix up the pasuk and they reinterpret the interpreters. And they give a purpose on the miracles that they show Hashem's action. That's why it's called a sign and a wonder. It's a reasoning that has no, that it's not the least bit praiseworthy. Rather, they weaken the whole concept of signs and wonders. That they weaken the point that Hashem brought them in order to strengthen the belief of believers. Again, he is not making the assertion that a miracle will ever convince somebody to believe.